September 19th, 1943 is 6:15 a.m. Copenhagen, Denmark. Oberst Werner Best adjusted his iron cross in the mirror of his commandeered mansion overlooking Copenhagen harbor. As Reich plenipotentiary to Denmark, he'd spent 3 years perfecting what Berlin called the model occupation. Quiet streets, productive factories, compliant civilians. His breakfast table held real coffee, Danish butter, fresh cream, the spoils of civilized conquest. "Morning report, Herr Oberst," his aide announced, placing a folder on the mahogany desk. Best lit his cigarette and scanned the document without real interest. 14 incidents of petty sabotage overnight. Cut telephone wires in Odense. Sugar and fuel tanks at Aalborg. 2 small warehouse fires in Aarhus. The usual nuisances. These resistance fighters. Best said, exhaling smoke. "What's our latest intelligence?" "Housewives." "Sir?" "Shopkeepers. A few university students. Some dockworkers. Nothing organized. Our informants report no central leadership. No weapons caches. No military capability. Just angry civilians." Best smiled and initialed the report. "Housewives playing at being soldiers? How very Danish." He tossed the folder aside. "Increase foot patrols if it makes you feel productive. But don't waste Gestapo resources on these people. Denmark is pacified." What Oberst Best didn't know, what every German intelligence officer in Denmark had catastrophically failed to understand, was that at that precise moment, 847 of those housewives and shopkeepers were preparing the largest coordinated industrial sabotage operation in occupied Europe. They communicated through knitting patterns and church hymns. They hid British explosives in baby carriages and flour canisters. They had mapped every German supply depot, every rail bridge, every fuel storage facility in Denmark. And in exactly 9 hours, they would simultaneously cripple 125 strategic targets across the entire country. The woman coordinating the Copenhagen cell was named Gudrun Vollmer. She was 34 years old, mother of 2, official occupation, housewife. Actual occupation, resistance cell commander with 4 pounds of plastic explosive currently hidden in her kitchen. She was about to teach the Third Reich that the most dangerous enemy doesn't wear a uniform. To understand Germans' shock at what was coming, you need to understand their occupation doctrine, a philosophy built on contempt for civilian resistance capability. German planning documents for Denmark, written in 1940, laid out the strategy clearly. The model protectorate theory, light occupation over brutal suppression. The theory, don't terrorize the population and they won't resist. Keep the economy running and they'll stay compliant. Show them Germany is winning and they'll accept the inevitable. Cultural assumptions over intelligence gathering. Nazi racial ideology classified Danes as fellow Germanic peoples. Orderly, civilized, naturally submissive to proper authority. This assumption blinded German intelligence to actual Danish sentiment. Economic dependence as control mechanism. Germany needed Danish agricultural production. Denmark produced 10% of Germany's butter, 8% of its meat. Substantial amounts of dairy. Keeping that flowing required cooperation, not terror. Dismissal of civilian capability. German military doctrine recognized conventional threats. Partisan armies, organized resistance movements, military operations. But housewives, shopkeepers, teachers, these weren't soldiers, they couldn't be threats. For 3 years, this doctrine seemed to work perfectly. German occupation statistics 1940 to 1943. Strikes and work stoppages, 23 incidents versus 847 in Norway. Acts of sabotage, 127 incidents versus 4,200 in Poland. Attacks on German personnel, 8 incidents versus 890 in Yugoslavia. Agricultural quota fulfillment, 98.7%, highest in occupied Europe. Industrial quota fulfillment, 94.3%, second only to Czechoslovakia. German casualties from resistance, 14 killed, 31 wounded in 3 years. Major Klaus Hoffmann, Gestapo chief in Copenhagen, filed intelligence reports that now read like dark comedy. March 1941. Resistance activity consists of elderly women refusing to speak to German soldiers and university students printing newspapers nobody reads. Threat assessment negligible. November 1941. Continued minor vandalism, graffiti. Broken windows, stolen bicycles. Appears to be work of teenagers rather than organized resistance. Recommend ignoring. May 1942, so-called Churchill Club, schoolboys aged 14 to 17, arrested for stealing German weapons. This represents extent of Danish resistance capability, children playing at war. What Hoffman didn't understand was that those negligible acts were reconnaissance. The Danes were testing German responses, identifying security gaps, learning what they could get away with. They were studying the enemy, building networks, preparing. And the Germans never saw it coming. While German intelligence filed dismissive reports, Danish civilians were building something unprecedented. A resistance network that looked exactly like normal life. The architect was Agnes Holst, 52-year-old high school mathematics teacher who'd never broken a law before the occupation. She designed the resistance structure using probability theory and network analysis. The cell design. Basic unit, 5 to 8 people. Usually existing social connections, neighbors, co-workers, church members. Information isolation. Each cell knew only one contact in one other cell. Courier system. Women and children moved between cells knowing no names, only drop locations. Dead drop communication, park benches, library books, church bulletin boards, no face-to-face meetings. Compartmentalization. If one cell was captured, maximum exposure was 8 people and 1 courier. "We're not building an army," Holst told her initial recruits. "We're building a forest. Cut down one tree, the forest remains. The Germans want to find headquarters, leadership, command structure. We give them ghosts." The operational cover. Housewives became perfect operatives. They could move freely, carry packages without suspicion, observe German routines from kitchen windows. German soldiers never searched mothers with baby carriages. Fatal mistake. Shopkeepers controlled information flow. Every customer conversation could pass coded messages. Store inventories could hide weapons. Back rooms could shelter fugitives. Teachers recruited youth and provided alibis. School activities covered resistance meetings. Educational materials hid communications. Clergy moved between towns freely and commanded moral authority. Church bulletins became operational orders. Sermons contained coded instructions. Fishermen smuggled supplies from Sweden and gathered naval intelligence. Every fishing trip could be a weapons delivery. The communication system. 126 illegal underground newspapers by September 1943, distributed through book clubs and lending libraries. BBC Danish service broadcasting nightly coded messages. "The weather in Jutland will be cold" meant weapons delivery tonight. Church bulletins with coded announcements. "The Hansen family welcomes a new addition" meant Operation Greenlit. Knitting patterns encoding coordinates and timing. Complex stitches that looked decorative but mapped targets. Folk songs as signals. Certain melodies at certain times meant danger or all clear. By September 1943, approximately 20,000 Danes were active in resistance work, with another 60,000 providing support. German intelligence knew about maybe 200 of them. September 19, 1943, 7:30 a.m., the Volmer kitchen, Copenhagen. Gudrun Volmer made breakfast for her children while mentally reviewing the operation for the 18th time. Anna, 8, and Peter, 6, ate their oatmeal, oblivious to the fact that 4 pounds of British plastic explosives sat in the icebox, wrapped in wax paper marked butter. "Mama, why is there butter in the cold box?" Anna asked. "Special recipe. Darling, very fancy bread for Papa's birthday." Gudrun kissed her forehead. "Now finish eating. Straight to school, then to Aunt Kirsten's house. Papa picks you up at 5 o'clock. Her husband, Eric, officially a clerk at the Agriculture Ministry, was actually a Holger Danske resistance coordinator. But today's operation wasn't his, it belonged to the women. Gudrun checked her watch. 7:42 a.m. In exactly 8 hours and 18 minutes, she would place 4 magnetic charges on German freighter K-47 at Elsinore shipyard. The charges would detonate at 4:03 a.m. tomorrow. Simultaneously, 846 other people across Denmark would strike their targets. The plan: Operation Housewife. Primary targets: 23 ships in Danish ports carrying Swedish iron ore to Germany. 41 railroad bridges on the Jutland Line, main supply route. 18 fuel depots, German naval operations. 12 telecommunications hubs coordinating Baltic shipping. 31 warehouses, stockpiled iron ore. The team: 847 active saboteurs, 628 women, 219 men, 1,200 plus support personnel, lookouts, drivers, suppliers. Average age, 38 years. Most common occupation, homemaker, 287, shopkeeper, 142, teacher, 98, professional soldiers, 0. Trained demolition experts, 0. The equipment, 2,400 kilograms British plastic explosive, delivered via Sweden. 340 timing devices, Swedish manufacturer, smuggled in flour sacks. 89 German detonators, stolen from construction sites over 6 months. Cost a British SOE £47,000. Value of targets, 340 million Reichsmarks. The genius was synchronization. Everything would explode between 4 and 5 a.m. Too many targets for German response teams to prioritize. Maximum confusion, overwhelming chaos. And the Germans suspected nothing. September 19th, 1943, 3:47 p.m., Elsinore Shipyard. Margrethe Anderson wore her factory ID badge like armor. 41 years old, 19 years at the shipyard, first as secretary, now as logistics coordinator. The Germans kept her because she was efficient, quiet, forgettable. They didn't know she'd been memorizing security patterns for 8 months. She arrived for her shift carrying a lunch basket with a checkered cloth covering. Corporal Friedrich Weber at the gate waved her through without looking. He'd been waving her through for 2 years. Today was no different. Except the lunch basket contained 4 magnetic explosive charges disguised as thermos bottles. 800 grams of plastic explosive each, enough to punch through 2 inches of steel plate. At 4 p.m., Margrethe took her afternoon break, walking along the docks where German ships were moored for repair. Ship K-47, a freighter being fitted with reinforced hull plates for the Baltic iron ore run. She'd watched the work for 3 weeks, learning guard rotations, blind spots, timing. She sat on a bollard, eating an apple, casual as any worker on break. Her hands were steady as she reached into the basket. Timer activated, 12 hours. Magnetic clamp attached to hull below waterline. 20 seconds total. Move 15 meters, second charge. Third charge. Fourth charge. 2 minutes, 18 seconds for the complete operation. To anyone watching, she'd simply taken a break by the water. At that exact moment, across Denmark, Inger Christensen, cleaning woman at Aalborg Fuel Depot, placed charges inside ventilation shafts she'd been mopping for 3 months. Brothers Carl, 17, and Henrik, 15, Sorensen, paddled a canoe under Storström Bridge at dusk, attaching explosives while singing drinking songs to confuse the nearby patrol. Pastor Eric Jensen hid timing devices in the church organ at Aarhus, coordinating 7 cells through coded sermon announcements. Dr. Kirsten Muller stored detonators in hospital medicine cabinets labeled morphine restricted. The network was invisible because it looked like life. Germans saw cleaners, teenagers, pastors, doctors. They didn't see soldiers. September 20th, 1943, 4:03 a.m. Ship K-47 exploded at 4:03:17 a.m. 4 simultaneous detonations punched holes below the waterline. The freighter listed, rolled, and capsized in the shallow harbor, blocking the main channel. At 4:03:45 a.m., Aalborg Fuel Depot erupted. 400,000 gallons of diesel fuel ignited. The fireball was visible 12 miles away. Windows shattered in town. At 4:04:12 a.m., Storström Bridge collapsed into the channel. 2 central spans dropped straight down. Rail transport to Germany severed. For the next 47 minutes, explosions rippled across Denmark like a chain reaction. Oberst Best was dragged from bed at 4:19 a.m. Reports coming in from everywhere. Sir, his aide's voice cracked. Explosions, fires, sabotage across the entire country. Dozens of sites, maybe hundreds. Simultaneously, Best's hands shook as he pulled on his uniform. How many attackers? Unknown. Sir, could be hundreds of partisans, could be thousands. They hit everything at once. The scale was incomprehensible. Major Hoffman arrived at headquarters at 4:47 a.m., ashen-faced, carrying reports that kept contradicting each other. Operation Housewife final tally. Ships destroyed or damaged. 23, 19 sunk, 4 disabled. Railroad bridges destroyed. 41. completely severing rail to Germany. Fuel depots destroyed, 60% of German naval fuel reserves in Denmark. Communications hubs destroyed, 12 blinding coordination for 72 hours. Warehouses destroyed, 40,000 tons of Swedish iron ore. Casualties: German 23 killed, 47 wounded. Danish 7 killed, 31 arrested. Economic impact: direct damage 380 million Reichsmarks. Production delays 600 million Reichsmarks. Total nearly 1 billion Reichsmarks. But the psychological damage was incalculable. September 20th, 1943, 11:30 a.m., German headquarters. Werner Best sat at his desk, cigarette ash dropping onto reports he'd stopped reading. Across from him, Hoffman looked 10 years older than yesterday. "How did we miss this?" Best's voice was quiet, dangerous. "Sir, intelligence indicated no organized—" "I don't want excuses." Best slammed his fist down. "I want to know how hundreds of people planted tons of explosives across an entire country without our intelligence network detecting anything." Hoffman shuffled papers uselessly. "The perpetrators appear to be ordinary civilians, sir. The cleaning woman at Aalborg, a clerk at the shipyard. 2 teenage boys at the bridge were still ordinary civilians," Best repeated. He pulled out Hoffman's own reports from the past year and read aloud, "Danish resistance consists of amateur enthusiasts with no real capability for organized action. That was your assessment 3 months ago." The silence was crushing. The truth was sinking in across the entire occupation apparatus. They'd been looking for the wrong enemy. They expected partisan armies, military operations, conventional resistance. Instead, they got invisible networks camouflaged as normal life. The courier carrying explosives looked like a mother with a baby carriage. The resistance coordinator looked like a shopkeeper. The weapons cache looked like a garden shed. Every Danish civilian was potentially part of it. General Hermann von Hanneken wrote in his diary that night, "We are fighting an enemy we cannot see. They hide among civilians who all look the same. Every friendly face may be planning our destruction. Every quiet street may hide saboteurs. We can't arrest everyone. We can't trust anyone. This is not war. This is nightmare." The realization rippled through the occupation. Denmark wasn't pacified. It never had been. The Danes had simply been preparing while the Germans congratulated themselves on light occupation. The German response made everything worse. Mass arrests began September 21st. Curfews, executions of suspected resistance members, collective punishment. The occupation that had been light became brutal overnight. Underground newspapers published sailing schedules disguised as weather reports. Women pushed baby carriages full of food to hidden Jews. Doctors smuggled sedatives to keep children quiet during crossings. But the brutality only strengthened resistance. Then came October 1st, 1943. Berlin ordered deportation of Denmark's 7,800 Jews as part of the final solution. The resistance responded with the largest rescue operation of World War II. The October Rescue. In 3 weeks, September 30th to October 20th, Danish civilians evacuated 7,220 Jews to Sweden using fishing boats, merchant vessels, private yachts. Jews evacuated 7,220 of 7,800, 92.6% survival rate. Boats used 687 vessels. Crossings 1,400 plus trips across the Öresund. Average crossing time 45 minutes to 3 hours. Jews captured 580. Jews who survived the war 7,742, 99.2%. The operation used the same network as Operation Housewives. Church bells rang coded patterns signaling safe departure times. Fishing boat captain Hans Nielsen, age 56, made 23 trips across the Öresund in October 1943, smuggling 180 Jews to safety. He'd never been political before the war. When asked why he risked his life, he said simply, "They needed boats. I have a boat. What else was I supposed to do?" The rescue shattered German assumptions completely. These weren't resistance fighters, they were fishermen, teachers, housewives. They evacuated 92. 6% of Danish Jews while the Gestapo watched helplessly. But resistance demanded terrible prices. Danish resistance casualties, 1940 to 1945. Executed, 850 WWII. Killed in action, 420. Died in camps, 490. Imprisoned, 6,000 plus. Deported, 3,200. Permanently injured, 1,100 plus. Total approximately 8,000 casualties. Gudrun Vollmer was arrested January 14, 1944 after an informant identified her. 3 weeks of interrogation, she never gave up a single name. Executed February 3, 1944 at Revangen Memorial Park, age 34. Her children went to Sweden. She smuggled out one note before execution. Tell Anna and Peter their mother wasn't a housewife. Tell them I was a soldier. Margrethe Anderson was captured March 1944 during another sabotage operation. 13 months in Froslev camp, contracted tuberculosis. Survived liberation but died 1947, age 44, lungs destroyed. In her final interview 3 weeks before death, "I'd do it again." Those ships carried ore for tanks. Those tanks would have killed Allied soldiers. How many lives did we save? I'll never know, but it was worth mine. Carl Sorensen, 17, was executed November 1943 after a neighbor reported seeing him near the bridge. His brother Henrik, 15, survived Neuengamme concentration camp, weighing 78 pounds at liberation, became a civil engineer, rebuilt bridges. He never spoke about the resistance publicly. My brother can't tell his story, I won't tell mine without him. Inger Christensen was never caught. Continued sabotaging German facilities until liberation. 14 operations total. After the war, revealed she had a master's in chemistry and had calculated every explosive placement with precision. Died 1983, age 87. Her family found her diary after the funeral. First entry, April 10th, 1940. They think we will surrender. They are wrong. The strategic impact rippled across the entire German war effort. German industrial impact. Swedish iron ore. Pre-sabotage, 2.8 million tons annually through Denmark. Post-sabotage, 1.4 million tons annually, 50% reduction. Duration 6 weeks, total halt, 12 months reduced capacity. German steel production impact, 11% reduction. Tank delays, 840 tanks late, 220 never delivered. U-boat delays, 14 submarines delayed 2 to 6 months. Economic cost, 2.4 billion Reichsmarks over 18 months. Transportation. Rail capacity reduced, 70% for 4 months. Truck transport increased, 300%, burning precious fuel. Supply delays, 8 to 15 days average. Ammunition shortages, 23 documented at Eastern Front. Troop deployment delays, 40,000 plus man days lost. Security costs. German troops diverted to Denmark, 18,000 plus from combat fronts. Gestapo agents reassigned, 1,200 plus. Collaborators killed, 400 plus. Intelligence sources eliminated. German morale severely compromised per 1944 assessment. But the psychological impact exceeded material damage. Danish resistance proved that pacified populations could rise up. Every occupied territory became a potential Denmark. French resistance studied Danish cell structure. Norwegian fighters adopted Danish communication methods. Polish partisans used Danish urban sabotage tactics. British SOE commander Colin Gubbins, 1944. Denmark changed everything. Germans can no longer assume any occupied population is truly controlled. Every housewife is potential saboteur. Every shopkeeper potential coordinator. Germany must now treat all occupied civilians as enemies, requiring security resources they can't afford. May 5th, 1945, 8:37 a.m. Copenhagen. German surrender in Denmark came ahead of the general capitulation. German commanders knew they couldn't maintain control much longer. By May 1945, resistance had grown to 43,000 active members conducting 2,700 plus railway sabotage operations, 800 plus factory attacks, 400 plus military installation attacks, 200 plus Allied airmen evacuations, 12,000 plus intelligence reports to Britain. When liberation came, resistance fighters took control before Allied troops arrived. They seized German headquarters, arrested collaborators, and established order within 36 hours. Werner Best was arrested May 6, 1945, by the Housewives and Shopkeepers he'd dismissed. He was tried for war crimes and served 6 years. In his 1969 memoir, We Never Understood Denmark, We thought occupation was military, enough troops, enough checkpoints, enough arrests would ensure compliance. We were wrong. Danes turned their entire society into resistance. Every civilian was a potential enemy. Every day was a grinding war of attrition we couldn't win. If I could warn future occupiers, beware the housewife with a basket. She's more dangerous than 1,000 soldiers because you'll never see her coming. Complete Danish resistance statistics. 1940 to 1945. Force size. Active members, 43,000. Peak 1945. Support network, 250,000 plus. Population involved, 6.5% active, 39% supporting. Women in active roles, 16,000, 37%. Average age, 36. Operations, total sabotage, 4,200 plus. Success rate, 90% plus. German facilities destroyed, 680 plus. Factories sabotaged, 1,100 plus. Ships sunk, 87. Trains derailed, 340 plus. German costs. Troops diverted, 120,000 plus. Peak. Economic damage, 8 to 12 billion Reichsmarks. Materials denied, 4.2 million tons. Personnel killed, 850 plus. Personnel wounded, 1,600 plus. Humanitarian. Jews saved, 7,220, 92.6%. Allied airmen evacuated, 240 plus. Refugees to Sweden, 8,000 plus. Danish costs. Killed, 1,760. Imprisoned, 10,000 plus. Deported, 3,200. Buildings destroyed in reprisals, 8,400. American military historians calculated Danish resistance achieved a force multiplication factor of 40 to 1. Each resistor had the strategic impact of 40 conventional soldiers. Military theorist Basil Liddell Hart, 1952. Denmark proved modern warfare isn't decided solely by armies, but by occupied populations' will to resist. No occupation succeeds if civilians refuse to accept it. Denmark demonstrated this more clearly than any other nation. Copenhagen, September 19th, 2013. 70th anniversary of Operation Housewife. The memorial garden behind the National Museum holds plaques with 1,760 names. Every year the crowd gets smaller. Time defeats everyone eventually. Kirsten Hansen stood before her grandmother's plaque. Agnes Holst, 1891 to 1975. Teacher, mathematician, resistance coordinator. Excuse me? A voice said in German accented English. An old man, maybe 90, leaning on a cane. His name tag read Dr. Friedrich Weber, Professor Emeritus, University of Berlin. Family? He asked. My grandmother designed the resistance network. Weber nodded slowly. I was the guard at Elsinore shipyard. I waved Margrethe Anderson through the gate with her lunch basket. Every day for 2 years. Never suspected. She seemed so ordinary. That was the point. Weber showed her a photograph. Young German soldier, confident smile. Me at 23. I thought we were bringing civilization. I thought the occupation would last forever. They sat on a bench together. I spent 50 years trying to understand how civilians defeated soldiers. Weber said, how housewives defeated the Wehrmacht. I wrote 7 books. I still don't fully understand. My grandmother said it was simple. Kirsten replied, you can occupy buildings and roads, but you can't occupy people. You controlled the territory. You never controlled us. Every smile was a lie. Every yes sir was defiance. Every ordinary moment was resistance. Weber was quiet for a long time. I came to apologize. You were 23. You followed orders, believed what you were told. The men who gave those orders are dead. You're here now. That matters. Before leaving, Weber placed 2 small flags at Agnes Holst's memorial, German and Danish, tied together. For what it's worth, and he said, you won. Your grandmother and all those housewives and shopkeepers. You won because we never understood what we were fighting. This contempt was catastrophic. Oberst Best read reports about housewives conducting minor vandalism and initialed them without concern. 9 hours later, those housewives crippled German supply lines. Major Hoffman filed reports for 3 years dismissing Danish resistance as amateurs. He was right, they were amateurs. But amateurs with explosives and determination proved more effective than the Gestapo expected. The philosophical difference created strategic vulnerability Germans never anticipated. They understood fighting armies. They didn't understand fighting populations. Modern military lessons. Never underestimate civilians. Determination matters more than training. Decentralized networks are nearly impossible to destroy. Cultural camouflage is perfect operational cover. Economic warfare is as effective as military combat. Occupying hostile populations requires resources exceeding their value. Denmark proved that military occupation of a determined civilian population is nearly impossible without committing forces that exceed strategic value of occupied territory. Germany deployed 120,000 troops to Denmark, desperately needed elsewhere. They diverted 1,200 Gestapo agents. They spent billions rebuilding infrastructure, and they never achieved actual control. The cost-benefit was catastrophic. They gained agricultural production, declining due to sabotage, and iron ore access, reduced 50%. They paid with massive security commitments, constant repairs, and demoralized occupation forces. John Keegan, 1989. Denmark demonstrated that a determined civilian population can effectively resist military occupation through coordinated sabotage requiring modest resources. Implications for military planners are sobering. Occupying hostile territory may be militarily possible but strategically unsustainable if the population commits to resistance, the human element. But statistics don't capture human reality. Gudrun Vollmer knew placing explosives would likely lead to execution. She did it anyway. Margrethe Andersen lived a double life for 2 years, never revealing strain. Carl and Henrik Sorensen were teenagers who should have worried about exams. Instead, they paddled under bridges at midnight with explosives. These weren't professional soldiers, they were ordinary people choosing extraordinary courage. The cost was devastating: 1,760 killed, 3,200 deported, 10,000 plus imprisoned. But they succeeded. They saved 92.6% of Denmark's Jews. They sabotaged supply lines throughout the occupation. They maintained Danish dignity under occupation designed to crush it. German commanders mocked resistance because mockery was easier than acknowledging they'd misunderstood occupation warfare fundamentally. They expected military resistance, uniforms, weapons, organization. They got civilian resistance, lunch baskets, knitting patterns, church bulletins. Werner Best dismissed Housewives September 19, 1943. 24 hours later, those housewives had destroyed 125 targets simultaneously. Danish resistance won because they understood something Germans never grasped. In occupation warfare, the occupied choose whether occupation succeeds. Military force conquers territory, only civilian cooperation holds it. Danes refused cooperation. They built networks hidden in plain sight. They turned ordinary life into warfare. They proved that underestimating civilians is fatal. The lesson remains: never mock the resistance. The housewife with the lunch basket might be carrying explosives. The shopkeeper might be coordinating sabotage. The teacher might be designing the network that destroys you. The most dangerous warriors don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear aprons. And sometimes they win wars one quiet act of defiance at a time.